Good afternoon. I'm Daley, the founder of Cioffredi & Associates Physical Therapy and Wellness. And this is our second version of Ask a PT, an opportunity for you to call in and ask specific questions about the hottest topics in physical therapy. This afternoon, we're talking about concussion management. And I have the opportunity to introduce Daley, who is a doctorate in physical therapy, but also holds a certification in vestibular care. So, Tara, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to come today.
Of course.
And we love chatting with you. Can you tell us just basically, what is a concussion for people that don't really know what that is?
So a concussion is basically a mild traumatic brain injury. They're kind of used synonymously in a lot of the literature. It's an injury to your head and neck that results in an injury to the brain. It can be from direct force to the head, like actually hitting your head on something, or it can be from like a blast injury, or an injury to the neck in which your head moves quickly enough to create an injury to the brain. Could be a fall, could be a car crash, could be sport related, like we said, blast. Most concussions resolve in 3 to 4 weeks, but a lot of times those symptoms and some of the complications can last a lot longer.
So you're kind of going to my next question, which is, are concussions the same for each person?
Definitely not. Everybody experiences, especially because it's a brain injury, everyone's brain is so different at baseline. Everyone experiences concussions differently, and they're different based on the parts of your brain that are affected. And one of the big things that happens, not just the initial injury when the concussion happens, but afterward when you have all these like metabolic and hormonal changes that happen in response to the injury, that everyone experiences extremely differently. So you can have this whole host of like physical symptoms, cognitive symptoms, emotional, you can have issues with sleep. All those things can affect each person differently.
Cool. Can you tell me some more about what are some of the specific kinds of symptoms that some people have but others don't?
Some of the more common symptoms are headaches and dizziness, sometimes nausea, vomiting, that type of thing is very common. People can have balance issues, fatigue, difficulty focusing. A lot of people have difficulty concentrating, difficulty multitasking, that type of like issues with more concentration-focused activity.
Well, that's quite variable.
Yeah.
I mean, can really be very different from one person to the other then.
Especially based on what you need to be able to do in your life to function well. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have trouble returning to school or to work, especially in high-stress situations. If you have a really demanding job, it can be really difficult.
I bet. We've seen enough of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any like red flags that would be indicators to ensure somebody sees a physician?
Definitely, if some of the symptoms that would require like definitely going to the emergency room or seeing a physician as soon as possible would be repeated vomiting after a head injury, very severe headache, worsening headache. Any type of neurological signs like a seizure or like asymmetry in your pupils or something like that can be a sign of something more serious. Mm-hmm. And as even days or weeks after a concussion, if you have any sort of like new numbness, tingling, difficulty walking or talking, that type of thing is definitely immediate concern.
I think some people think that you have to lose consciousness to have a concussion. I mean, is that true?
Not at all. Usually a loss of consciousness is, especially longer loss of consciousness, is indicative of a more serious concussion. But these mild brain injuries can happen without a loss of consciousness, and you might even be fine right afterwards, but it's hours or days later that you notice something's wrong. All
right, so is there anything that's, sometimes people are really cautious about after having one. Is there something that's really important to understand about the frequency of concussions? Or the number of concussions, maybe?
So, from what I've seen and from what a lot of the research shows, the more concussions that a person has, the more serious and the more drawn out your symptoms can be afterward. One big thing to look out for, and why a lot of the new protocols that have come out are really strict about return to activity, is if you have a second concussion after once you haven't fully recovered from the first concussion, it can be really, really dangerous.
So it's key to really get a full recovery from a concussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then be aware, if you have another one, then you're going to have to take more precautions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about what kinds of things you do in treatment, in physical therapy treatment, that you might work on with folks?
Yeah, so with PT specifically, and there's so many symptoms someone can have after a concussion, but some of the things that we're really especially equipped to handle are the neck injuries, some of those cervical musculoskeletal impairments. People can have issues with cervical proprioception and knowing where your body really is in space. We do a lot of work on visual and vestibular issues after. So
what kind of visual issues might people have that you work on, for example?
A lot of people have trouble focusing, especially focusing on things that are close to them after a concussion, and combining that with saccadic eye movement, like scanning across a page, is a big thing. So a lot of people have trouble reading.
That would be why they have trouble reading or headaches reading.
Exactly. It's even worse on a computer screen.
So the stuff that you do actually helps eliminate that, resolve that?
You can train a lot of those reflexes to make those things easier for someone. Kind of like you would do bicep curls. You do a few and you gradually increase how many. And
so it's not the simple, hey, you got a bruise to your brain, so you got to just rest. There's some active treatment that really rehabilitates some of the problem.
Exactly.
Good.
There's a lot that we can do to help people manage all these different things, and really train them up rather than just waiting for them to get better. People sometimes have any balance issues. I think you might have mentioned that. Yeah, a lot of people have issues with balance, especially because there's so many reflexes that have to be coordinated in your brain to control your balance. And all those things are a little bit slowed, or they might be a little bit muddier after a head injury. So getting all of that tuned back up is really important and really helpful.
Excellent. All right, so let's say somebody has a concussion. They didn't lose consciousness. How soon after might it be valuable to do physical therapy?
It can be pretty quick. Most of the guidelines encourage 24 to 48 hours of real rest. But after that, you can return to activity as tolerated, really. So that's going through an evaluation, getting back to walking, maybe light cycling, something like that. And then just starting to work on things and return to activity in a way that doesn't provoke the symptoms and make them worse.
So again, it sounds like just total resting for 2 weeks, that may not necessarily be the fastest return for somebody. Active treatment may be something that really is important for them. Yeah. Very cool.
And a lot of the research is showing that active treatment gets people better so much faster, and you don't deal with some of the things that can happen if you're resting for too long, like the deconditioning and the depression and things that come on when you're laying in bed for weeks on end.
Yeah, no, so true. We know folks that they're impaired, whether it's visual stuff or balance, or they can't tolerate activity. Some people that want to return to sport, and they really get very discouraged because they can't do the things that they love to do, and they're finding that just rest is not healing things up.
Right.
So it's not really simply this idea of healing, is it? It sounds like reconditioning and reworking some of the reflexes and things like that you said.
Yeah, and getting back to, it's like starting running all over again, getting back to those things that you love to do, but in a slow, gradual way. Very
cool. Now, I know you've got protocols and stuff in front of you. Is there, when we talk about returning to sport, for example, are there some clear guidelines for that in the sense of how we can help people return to increasing the vigor of their...
Yeah, so a couple that I have right in front of me, and a lot of the good protocols, you want to return to learning or returning to school, returning to work, you want to do that first. We want no symptoms at baseline, no symptoms with a day of school, for example. The one I have in front of me is from Hanover High. It's graded in colors. You go back to school with no work, half work, at school with full work, and then return to full classroom learning. And then you can start the return to play. Once you can get through all of that without symptoms, you can start light aerobic exercise. We want no symptoms. Then you can go moderate aerobic exercise, no symptoms, and then gradually returning to sport-specific activities.
So really, it's a gradient approach.
Exactly.
It's not the rest thing. It's the gradient approach to exposure.
Yep.
Very cool.
And it's, like you said, most of them are at least 4 to 6 phases per piece, like per learning and then per sport. And it's not, 10 or 12 days. It's 10 or 12 phases. It might take each person days or weeks to get through the phases.
It really varies person to person, and very individualistic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's great, Tamara. Thank you so much for the information on that. Is there anything else that you think the audience may want to know that we haven't covered yet for today? Well, we can open it up for questions.
Yeah. I think even if it's seemingly a pretty uncomplicated concussion, there's usually a lot we can do. At least check things out and see if there's anything that we can help with to help somebody really get back to their life and not deal with a lot of the nagging symptoms like getting a headache every time you use the computer or something like that.
Very good. Yeah. Sometimes things that we don't think about.
Right.
It's just they're a hassle. It may not be a total pain. It's a hassle.
Right.
You don't have to live that way.
Right.
We can help handle that. Very cool. Well, look, I want to thank you again for coming today and taking the time. And Matt, if we have any other questions, we're really happy to handle those.
Yeah, those are all the questions we have right now. But if anybody does have any questions at some point after this, feel free to get in contact with us and we'll be happy to help out.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.